Okay, thank you for your patience. I think we are good to go.
All right, well, good morning. This is the Zoning Ordinance Advisory Committee. It is March the 26th, 9:13 a.m., and we're going to call the meeting to order. We'll start by calling roll.
Okay, thank you very much. Nathaniel Barrett. Paul Carden.
Here.
Ryan Baring.
Here.
Enrique McGregor.
Here.
Tip Housewright.
Here.
Brent Rubin. He joined us online. I need to make him a panelist. We'll go to Mark Reeves.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Brent Rubin, are you there?
Yes, I am. Just
very good.
moved over.
Tabitha Wheeler-Reagan? Not present. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone being here. I believe I'm going to turn this over to staff to introduce our briefing today.
Sure, thank you very much. Well, we're happy to introduce Camiros, who is our consultant working on our full zoning code reform, development code reform. We're excited to hear their description of the diagnostic today. However, they've been working with staff for 1.5, almost 2 years now, as well as other stakeholders in the community to review our current code, understand some of the issues, understand the challenges, and how it compares to best practices in 2025. And so I'll let them individually introduce themselves, but I just want to say that everything that we're talking about today has undergone a lot of review by staff. You'll hear some suggestions today. There haven't been any detailed decisions made. This is just the review of how our current code compares to sort of best practices today. And so with that very short introduction, I'll turn it over to Arista Strangis with Camiros.
And since you all haven't seen us before, we'll do quick intros of ourselves. I'm Arista Strangis, principal and partner at the planning and zoning firm Camiros. I've been there for a long time. I'm going to stop saying the years at this point. And we do zoning work across the country. We're very happy to be here to work with the city of Dallas. Happy to be at this point where we're starting to present, approaches and opinions on the current code. And I am joined by Chris and Mitch, who I'll allow them to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Jeanette. I'm a principal with Camiros as well.
Good morning. Mitchell Corona. I'm an associate with Camiros.
Oh, I got to keep remembering this microphone. Do you want me to just dive right in?
Unless you have a song to sing, that'd be great.
Nobody wants that.
We welcome music here.
Okay, so we are you probably all had a chance to at least take a look at the code diagnostic. And so we're gonna present some of the bigger ideas contained with it. Again, it's a pretty detailed diagnosis of what's going on with the current code and what we're seeing. So we're gonna kind of hit the big ideas that are there. One of the things we'll do is we find it easier in meetings like this to take a pause after each kind of big chunk section. Obviously we can go back and forth, but we think sometimes that kind of lets you get your thoughts out when they come to you kind of right then and there. So not saying we can't go back as we get further into the presentation. So Dallas zoning reform, we finally have a name. We're very happy about that. So, and a tagline, simple, clear, future ready. And really what we're looking to do here is create a document that is, like the tagline says, simple. The regulations are streamlined. It's easy to follow. It's easy to understand. It's clear. The rules that apply, everybody can understand what they are. And it's designed for the Dallas you're becoming. I'm a Chicagoan, not the Dallas of yesterday. So really, this is the kind of the momentum moving forward in this process. What are our objectives in this undertaking this? So obviously, a lot of it and kind of why this took us a little bit longer to get here was that Forward Dallas is going on, and we wanted to make sure that we gave that project the space. We didn't want to conflate the two at that time. So basically looking at what's been adopted within Forward Dallas and how can we help implement some of that. We want to organize the code to be user friendly, predictable, consistent, kind of easy enough for everybody to kind of pick up and understand what applies to their piece of property and to understand what applies to the property next door to them. Obviously, housing is a big issue. We want to create more opportunities for diverse and affordable housing throughout the city. Sustainability and resiliency, again, another priority. Bringing in some design standards so they're not just kind of relegated to the form-based districts, that they've kind of applied broadly throughout the document. Reduce dependence on special approvals, in particular your 1,200 and counting PUDs. We want to kind of move away from that. And increase the transparency of development approval so everybody kind of understands what that process is. So what is this book that we're all looking at today? It's a more in-depth review of the current regulations. So we sat down and we read the whole code, and then we started to look at ways to improve based on those principles you just heard about. We did a whole series of stakeholder interviews, over 30 participants. This was around December 2023, January 2024, to kind of get a sense of from various people within the community, from residents to developers to architects to ex-city staff members, kind of what they feel is going on in the development environment here in Dallas. Obviously, we've had a lot of discussions with staff. We've gone through this document in depth a couple of times with staff. So it's really been a great collaborative process of really understanding what's going on and the directions we should move forward. Based on our understandings of best practices out there, what we see and what we do in other communities, kind of bringing that flavor into the document as well. And really looking to create concepts and regulatory approaches that will set the direction for drafting. It should be noted, the code diagnostic, it's not going to be revised. This is really out there to get people thinking about the code and for us to collect feedback that will inform us in drafting. So really we're here to get obviously ZOAC's thoughts on this, the public's thoughts on this. There'll be a public engagement around this document as well to get broader feedback. But really it's really meant to get people thinking and tell us if we're really heading in the wrong direction on anything we've been suggesting. So the first thing we saw when we opened up your book is organization and how things just like to move between different sections without any seeming rhyme or reason to it. And so it was fun finding things or realizing when people told us, no, we do control that. It's just over there. So we want to organize. We want to create a code that's easy to follow, that's got some intuitive structure to it. We want to bring in way more graphics. We want to make sure everything's defined once and defined correctly and typically in one place. Create new measurement methodologies that basically outline what's building height, what's lot width, what are setbacks, how are they measured, so it's consistent in one place, one time, everybody understands what applies. Make sure there's a consistent voice. That's what's good in a code rewrite. Over the years, amendments happen, different people write them. You end up with things that don't sound the same. So we want to make sure we get that done. And then compartmentalization, which is really when we look at the code structure overall. What we want to do is create logical compartments for things. So really, and as part of this and as it's a rewrite, it is proposed to make this chapter 63. So it won't be 51B. It'll be chapter 63, the zoning and subdivision code. There's a few articles in your current 51A that would remain there because they're not under the purview of what we're charged with updating, things like parkland dedication, floodplain, thoroughfare standards, historic preservation, gas drilling and production, and then doing things like moving things like fees moving it into the city code out of the zoning code. So what you see here in this box is really how we are proposing to organize what goes on in the code. So you'll see the initial articles 1 through 4, really introducing the code, making it clear, kind of what is the title and purpose, what are the definitions, what are the measurement methodologies, how do we deal with whatever nonconformities remain. And then we head into the heart of it, which is the districts. So you'll see here, you'll have Article 5 that introduces the districts in the map. And then we get into the kind of clumps of district types, the land use categories, residential, commercial and mixed use, industrial, special purpose, and overlay. So they'll be kind of organized within those articles. And then followed up with Article 11, which would have all your use regulations put together in one section so that it's easy to find everything that's allowed within the different districts rather than listing them out. And then we got to move away from the principal building on the site, which is really a lot of what the district standards are dealing with, into kind of everything else that happens there. So general development standards, which is kind of a catch-all for things like exterior lighting, site visibility triangles at street intersections, accessory structures. We know that there's been, obviously you guys have just gone through significant work on parking standards. So that would be integrated here. landscape and tree preservation, and then signs. And then finally into the administration. So who administers it, who does what, how do I do it, and what is the process for that, both in terms of zoning and in terms of subdivision, and then moving into enforcement. And then finally, this Appendix A, the sign plans. If you've looked at your sign chapter, we thought it was really big when we looked at it. And then we realized the sign regulations aren't that big. It's this whole series of sign plans that overwhelms anybody who's trying to look at it. And I've been looking at sign codes for over 25 years. There, I said it, how long I've been working in zoning. And so we really just want to move those. They would remain in power, but we would just move them to the end of the code as an appendix so that they don't overwhelm the other sections. So quick pause here. Any questions on organization? Usually that's kind of the easiest part of this presentation. So
Even though it's the easiest part, I personally find it maybe the most impactful part. I mean,
that is true.
We'll be making decisions within each category about uses and districts and development standards and all of these things, and it's going to take a lot of brain power. But just having an outside perspective come in and sort of take the ball of spaghetti and string it out and help us make sense of our own regulations, I think is 75% of what we're doing here. So I'm excited about that, and I want everyone to know.
If I may, I could monopolize the whole morning with questions, and I promise I won't do that. But and I may put you on the spot with this one question, but at the beginning of the day, if I really am excited that you all have a sort of a national perspective, maybe an international perspective on these things, and so you're coming to our city and looking at our code. And so if on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is a great code and 1 is a disaster, I mean, just can you just tell me like what you're seeing, or is that, or you want to?
Why does everyone ask this?
If you want to plead the fifth, that's okay. We'll give you a pass.
Why? Well, I will say we started working with somebody else, and their code is worse. So, and they're a big city. I'm not gonna say who. Their code is. Ooh, they tried to address every possible situation, and it's just made a mess of things. There's good stuff in there. I'm not going to give you a number because that's not nice. It's just, I mean, there's good stuff in there. It's just hard to find. Organization-wise, it's very messy. It's become a junk drawer. Usually codes have a junk drawer where it's one chapter where they just start throwing things in there and it's all disconnected and nobody knows. It's kind of, everything kind of became a junk drawer. So that's why it got hard to understand what was going on. And kind of, it was interesting during conversations where like, well, you don't allow this. And yes, we do. I'm like, where? So, but I don't want to give a number. I mean, Chris, you're free to give a number if you'd like to.
You put her on the front. You put me up.
Yeah, I'm sending it down the line. Okay. So the next big topic area, we like to kind of dip our toes in the water before hitting big things like the districts, are the uses. And part of what we want to do is make sure that the use section is properly organized. And what we do is create a global use matrix. This is not you. This is actually, if I'm looking at it, this is Hot Springs, Arkansas. But this is an example of the table. They call their special uses conditional uses, if you're wondering what the C's are. It's a really great way to organize uses. It prevents you from, doing things where you've added it to one, but you don't remember to add it to the other one. So basically, and anybody using this can access it in one of two ways. Either say I own a piece of property in one of these C districts. I want to know what I can do. I go straight down the use table. I can see all the uses that I can have on my piece of land, or I live next door to one of these properties. I see what can come up next to me. And then the other way is really just to look at the use type and say, okay, say I want to open up an arts and fitness studio. Where can I do that? So it's really intuitive to people to kind of look at this table and understand where uses can go. Becomes a lot easier to change it, to modify it, to add a use, to do all of that, really making sure that it's just done in this one spot. It lists all the principal and accessory uses. Each of these would be defined. So we're trying to really reduce any interpretation issues that come up in terms of, well, what use is this? Where does it fit? We'd have definitions for that. And then you can even see here in this example table, some of these uses have standards that they need to comply with. And we're going to take a look at things that you've been approving through the years, whether it be through PUDs or special uses, and kind of a lot of similar conditions. If they're constantly being approved with the same set of conditions, let's just build those conditions into the code. That's really where we want to go. And so to that end, we want to look at simplifying the approval of uses. This took me a little while to wrap my head around as I was reading through this. You have a specific use permit, and I apologize, I'll probably call it special. Typically, it's just a term I use more frequently. It's a good thing. We want to maintain it. We're not suggesting to get rid of special uses. We just want to take a look at those and see, which ones really should be those and in which districts. Now, you've got limited uses, development impact review uses, and residential adjacency review uses. And we really think we don't need these different types of special approvals for uses. We can build in standards for the uses that have been subject to these. When we're looking at things like residential adjacency, that's an even bigger issue than just uses. We're going to talk about that in districts, but it's really looking at how are we treating those transitions between residential and other types of things. So we don't need to complicate the process with other types of approvals if we can achieve kind of the same goal that we've been looking to do. And that's really what we're trying to do here. You had one of the most unique things I've ever seen. It's that specific use permit uses are currently subject to renewal, or they can be sometimes, maybe, depending on if they're approved, but it's in the code. It says that. This is very uncommon. There's a number of issues that kind of arise around, doing something like that. And in particular, issues of, are you penalizing somebody because you just don't like them? I mean, it can be that severe in terms of perceptions. And so I've not seen anybody else do it. I have not read every code in the country, but I've not seen anybody else do that. We very specifically recommend elimination of that. Just let's make it a process. If it's approved, it's approved. If it's a problem, there's ways to deal with it if it's a problem. We also want to make sure that we're adding in new uses, things like, artisan workshops, product design, food truck parks, specialty food service, commercial kitchens, things like showrooms that are popping up. And then we also want to address corner stores. We want to make sure that we've got something, I believe in the report, called it neighborhood commercial establishment. All right. Okay. And essentially what that is where you've got stuff in parts of the city where on the corner, it used to be a small shop or it used to be a small restaurant, allowing those to reopen, basically acknowledging their presence and creating that kind of local small scale economy that happens within the neighborhoods. And there's a lot of controls that we can put on this to make sure it doesn't get out of hand and that things are controlled in that way. But we think it's a great way to bring a very kind of gentle mixed use into neighborhoods where it always was there, but now because of non-conforming status, it's not allowed to operate. And so with that, like I said, dipping the toes in with uses, we're going to dive into districts next, but just wanted to take a quick pause and see if there's any questions, comment.
As we go through this as we go through this process with SUPs, I can imagine that will be a touchy subject. Do you see a comparable solution that other cities have used, or I guess could you just a little bit explain what the workaround would be from this renewal period for SUPs? What do you see?
In terms of the renewal of the SUPs?
Correct.
We don't see it. I've never seen it before. I've never seen another city use that. Once the special use is granted, runs with the land, it's granted to the land, not to the owner. Basically says this use is appropriate for this piece of land, and it continues on until it's closed. Seen a lot of times that it can be something that causes a lot of trouble in the neighborhood, but the SUP process isn't the means for that. That needs to be tackled through things like police powers, nuisance, all the other kind of things that control. If it was a permitted use, it would have the same. If the route that you would take with a use that's allowed to shut it down because it's troublesome is the same route you would take with an SUP. The SUP isn't the process for that, because somebody can come in, that use is there with the land, somebody else can come in, buy that property and run it perfectly fine, and there not be an issue. And that's really, I think, probably, I'm gonna guess, I don't know, guess where that kind of came from, the idea of, being able to control uses that, create issues. But it really becomes it's on its face, it's a very unpredictable thing for somebody coming in. If I'm trying to open a business and I want a special use and you give it to me, but you tell me I got to be back in a year to make sure that I can keep going, I kind of would walk away at that point, because I would just be like, I don't understand why so it's a test period, but I got to sink $100,000 into this building to, get it up to speed. So that's really on our end where that was our initial reaction, was this is not great. This is going to deter people from opening a business, from pursuing something, because if I'm going to spend a lot of capital, I'm not going to do it if I don't know I can be there in a year.
And, even if the renewal itself is kind of a rote process and you just come in and you get your renewal, the fact that it's there, the fact that you could not be renewed just builds in, like Arista was saying, this level of unpredictability that's really going to kind of disincentivize investment in certain improvements and uses, right? If I don't know that I'm going to be able to operate my business for 5 years solidly, how does that impact my business plan? How does that impact decisions that I'm making about where I'm locating and what I'm going to do? So it just builds in sort of a level of unpredictability that's we don't see it in other places.
Yeah.
And especially given sort of the broad range of uses that are subject to an SUP right now, I think, schools being one of them, just having that additional layer of unpredictability in there is not a great thing from a perspective.
Thank you.
I have a comment or a question, perhaps for Michael. Is it common in Dallas to have SUPs not renewed because of? Is it something that you think in general the community sees as a real risk?
I think I would actually direct that. Sarah May, I don't know if you heard the question, or one of the commissioners in the room, about how frequently do we see an SUP not renewed when it's up for renewal? Or maybe Megan.
I don't have any data on that, but a lot of the times I think the more common outcome is that it expires and the property owner had no idea, even though we try to send out courtesy reminders and stuff like that. So we have a lot more properties, instead of CPC taking action to not renew, that they just fall out of compliance, and then it's a task of getting back on the wheel to get renewed. So it's pretty rare that they're denied a renewal when they're doing their best and putting in good faith effort. But it happens.
I'm trying to figure out the balance here between, and on one hand, SUPs do motivate an operator to make sure that their business is not a nuisance and so forth. The other side of it is also, without that SUP, then we would only rely on code enforcement, and I think we're pretty stretched thin in that department, are we not? I mean, would we be able to really follow up on this? And I'm trying to think through. I'm surprised that other people don't use the SUP, because it has been helpful in many instances, even in getting neighbors comfortable with the idea that there was one in my district for the opening of a shelter for people, and the neighbors were concerned about what it would bring, and the assurance was, well, look, here's the SUP. It's going to be there for 2 years. If it really turns into a crime hub and all the concerns you have, then we don't renew it. And yeah, somebody did invest money, capital investment, to get that up to the store. So anyway, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm processing that. I think of SUPs as useful, but I'm here to learn.
Yeah. Oh.
No, I would just say too, I think the value of an SUP process is essentially determining whether or not that use is appropriate for that location, right? So if that use is appropriate for that location today, ostensibly that use is appropriate for that location 2 years from now when that permit's going to come up for renewal. And typically what we see is looking for operational issues with a particular use. If it's operating as a nuisance, if there are other business, considerations in terms of how it's interacting with the neighborhood, impacts that it's causing, the city does have other mechanisms. And oftentimes businesses will operate with a business license. So you could, think about maybe removing the business license. Doing it through zoning and through something like SUP, kind of exercising that police power, nuisance control aspect of things is pretty uncommon, because typically what we're looking at with something like an SUP is just whether that use works in that location.
And I appreciate that. And I want to be careful not to make a change or not do something just because everybody else doesn't do it. I'd love for us at the right time to just think through this and weigh the pros and cons of having the SUP. Thank you.
I think one additional consideration I'd throw in there is that not every time, but when you evaluate on an ongoing basis how appropriate a land use is that was approved 2 years ago or 5 years ago or something like that around the table, you may not always have the same criteria, may not always have the same folks making the determination. And so I would highlight what they describe in their report as the subjectivity of using an SUP as an enforcement mechanism rather than using enforcement as an enforcement mechanism. And so understanding that we do sometimes lack staff on code enforcement. I was talking to one of our ADs yesterday, and he had to go in the middle of it because there was an emergency, and he was the person on call. And I would just highlight that the more we can lean into the appropriateness and the appropriate uses of different departments and divisions for their function, overall, the fewer complications we will have in the future going forward.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Rubin, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I agree with a lot of what the consultant has had to say. I think we've stretched SUPs well past, land use evaluations to almost, being more of a, operational permitting scheme. I guess if we, sort of look to modify the process, just a couple questions. Other cities that have SUPs without renewals, is there still a process to sort of revoke it if we do make a land use determination that a land use is no longer appropriate in those cities?
A few do. I've seen it. It's not that common. Essentially, what would end up, essentially, it's really the business licenses, like Chris was saying, that come into play there. One thing that we have to check is kind of what SUPs and the vested rights here in Texas mean, because you've got particular land use law to the state of Texas. So we have to see how that revoking the SUP works, which might be why this renewal was built in. But we can take a look at that.
Well, you were one step ahead of me on the vested rights, non-conforming rights question, which I think is where a lot of the rub on this will come down to. And potentially, one benefit of moving things outside of zoning into a, some sort of other permitting process, may be that we can control some of the really problematic operational aspects without getting into, deep vested rights and non-conforming rights issues. So I look forward to seeing the creative and thoughtful solutions that we're able to come up with as we go down that path, because I agree that there's some things that require an SUP that just boggle my mind. But there are some things like more problematic uses like restaurant drive-throughs and other things like that I would love to see some sort of permitting process that we go through that maybe takes place outside of zoning.
Thank you. Are we moving on? We're moving on. Okay. Part of the code, the districts. So some of the key proposals that we have within the code diagnostic and things that we've heard, and obviously things that Fort Dallas has spoken to as well. So simplify the single family districts and increase the amount of conformity within the single family. So these are really the ones that are kind of currently in place. In order to get that housing diversity that's being sought, we've also proposed to create a set of gentle density residential districts. So these are things that allow for more than just single family. It's single family, two house, townhouse, sometimes smaller plex buildings, triplex, quadruplex. Refining the multifamily and townhouse districts, Very interesting. You have a townhouse district, but you don't use the term townhouse in the code. So that was a fun little find. Create a set of commercial and mixed use districts based on an increase in scale and function so that they really relate to the different areas within the city of Dallas. Integrate mixed use development into all of the commercial districts, refine the range of industrial districts, and make sure that the special purpose and overlay districts are addressing the specific things that they're targeting that are needed within the city. So for single family, you probably saw this table within the document itself. What we did was a lot size analysis. So basically what we did was take a look at each of these areas and see kind of how much land area zone this, how much meets the minimum lot size that you have now. And based upon that, these are the current residential districts. Again, these are single family. Kind of how can we make more conformity happen? So in the R1 acre district, just by reducing it to 40,000 square feet, what's typically called a builder's acre, rather than 43560, you can up the compliance by about 26%. So basically that district, just by dropping 3,000 plus square feet, more lots conform to the standard. Generally, we saw a good percentage in the half acre district. You know, when you're at about 18% nonconformity, that's a good standard. That's a goal that you're trying to get to. So we haven't recommended any changes there. Then we took a look at R16, R13, and R10. These are similar. They're all single family districts. When you start looking at the lot sizes, what we really saw, if we consolidated these all into one district of 10,000 square feet, you get a lot more compliance. You know, the percent under the minimum lot size are very minimal when you bring these together. So the thought here was, let's just bring them together. These aren't big increment differences between them. It's 3,000 really going one way or the other. So then we looked at the R75. Again, pretty good percentage there, 23%, almost 24. Maintain that one. The R5, again, your R5 single family, very few under the minimum lot size, really to maintain that as well. You may want to look at, and Mitch did just to say Mitch did a lot of this, Mitch did all of this analysis. We just looked at it. So really what we saw is that if you move the R7, parts of R75 and R5, is that accurate? Just around, you could get more conformity. The uses are the same. It's a single family district. We're just looking at the lot size. So really this is dealing with the current ones and the recommendations for your current single family. But understanding that we are looking to kind of, as we move forward, again, forward Dallas, pun was not intended there, really to look at ways to kind of allow for more stuff to happen in the city of Dallas. So these proposals were, one, to create a new R3 single family district. This would be a small lot, 3,000 square foot district. There's almost 2,000 properties out there that could fit within this R3 category. So this would be new. We're not proposing any areas for rezoning. You know, we're not anywhere near that stage. We're just talking about giving you the right tools in the toolbox to move forward and implement when the time is right. So to that end, incorporating these gentle density residential districts, kind of talked about this term before. These would be districts that allow for a diversity of housing types. And we're talking duplex, triplex, quadruplex, perhaps even some townhouse in addition to single family. There's benefits here. You can use it for infill. You can increase the housing supply. There's more diversity in the residential dwellings. And really our approach here was basically to take these districts that we've already talked about, the R10, the R75, and the R5, and make a parallel set. So the ones you've got stay, there's zone that is your single family district, but we can give you the tools of a parallel set of these that allow for this type of flex development. With these parallel districts, we can absorb the existing D duplex district into there. If we maintain the current duplex district, again, the findings were we really got to bring that lot size down to 5,000 square feet in order to make it more conforming and more feasible to, in a duplex district, to build a duplex. So that's really what we're looking at here. So again, this is making a parallel set of districts, not replacing them, a companion piece that can be used in the future to create this type of general density residential development. So we looked at the townhouse districts as well. I'm going to wait for, I'm noticing it lags behind me a little bit. And Wow, okay. I noticed it was lagging, but it wasn't lagging this much. Wait, okay, let me. I mean, I can talk through. Okay, there we go. All right. So we also looked at your townhouse and your multifamily districts as well. Existing districts. Townhouse, there's currently 3 of them, probably all very well aware. They're basically almost identical in use permissions. It's just some density limits, the amount of dwelling units per acre. We think the good approach here is to consolidate these 3 into one, simplify them with a single minimum lot area per dwelling unit, get rid of dwellings per acre. We don't see that used very much anymore. We're really just looking at kind of how we design the site, so the lot area per acre for townhouse. Also in the multifamily districts, we looked at those. One of the things that we did here is that the base standards for at least some of the multifamily may be too low. So there's always the need to get the bonuses that are in place in the current code, the affordable mixed use bonuses, to make the project feasible in terms of height and density. So we hear that there's nothing that just lets me do something. I always have to go through this process. As we looked at it, you've got basically 4 districts. There's very little distinction between MF1 and MF2. And then MF3 and MF4 are reserved for higher density multifamily. So we think consolidating MF1 and MF2 as a lower scale, lower density multifamily district would work. There's very little distinction between the two. MF3 and MF4 would function as a higher tier multifamily with a little bit more kind of control over its form through height, through siting standards. We don't want to get rid of the mixed income bonus. We're not proposing to eliminate that, but we think there should be at least some base density that works, base height that works, to allow for some multifamily development, in particular because, as you have needs for more diverse, more affordable housing, we need to allow some things to kind of get out the gate and pretty quickly. We looked at the commercial and mixed use districts. We want to really kind of bring, I talk fast, but I mean, this is, well, the next one we'll move on to, I'll just talk slowly and it'll catch up, is the commercial and mixed use districts. And it's really the idea here when we looked at these districts is to create this scale of things based on a logical increase in intensity and function as we go on. So we looked at the office districts, and really what we're advising here is to revise and integrate them into just the commercial mixed use districts that are coming out. I think we're all well aware after the pandemic, the need for office exclusive areas has really dropped out. Just this table alone, all 3 of us in a firm all work from home. Well, these 2 work from home every day. I work from home weeks on end. So we see that real kind of depreciation in just office areas. So we want to make sure we're allowing office uses, not proposing that, but mixing them up with other things to create that mixed use environment. The current NS and CR districts, they're very narrowly drawn. We want to make sure that they've got more allowances in place for things like mixed use to very small scale mixed use developments. The RR district, this is your auto-centric large scale commercial district. You're a big city. You're going to have areas like this. I know we all want and love walkable mixed use areas, but the IKEA and the car dealerships have to go somewhere. And so that's really something that, making sure a district can reflect good character, but, really is a place for these types of uses. Your mixed use district have this inflexible control of the percentage of uses that you can have to have mixed use. We don't see that anymore. It's a lot of math and it's kind of dangerous because if those numbers of residents and tenants change, you're technically non-conforming. So we want to create true mixed use districts that allow for things to happen. I know there's been talk about TOD districts already. This is not something new that we're bringing to the table. We really think that we can help support transit-oriented development with different scales of TOD districts, kind of working them in a new set of base districts. And then really looking at the central area districts. This is reworking the C1A to be the central business district that's within the highway loop, really emphasize its role as the high density core of the city. Using CA2, transition out of the immediate core and rezone it as a mixed use district. Limited portions of the CA2, though, that are close to the central business district could still be appropriate for CBD, or the CBD district. And then really what we said, I kind of gave a mouthful right there, but when we're looking at downtowns, we know them to be intense, they're tall, they've got a lot of density, they've got a lot of uses going on. We want to reinforce that, but not every single area of a downtown is the same. So what we typically do, in particular of cities of Dallas' size, is to create sub-districts for that central business district. So you have the core where everything is the biggest, the tallest, the brightest. The outer core, which starts to form that, transition out of there and then into some of the kind of residential mixed use that may happen as well. It's a small area, but the character of it does change within these sections. So that's really something we wanted to pick up on and really kind of work through this. We don't have specific recommendations for each. We're just kind of looking at it kind of just from a physical form. Additional changes, you've got urban corridor districts. They're not on a map. They just kind of float out there. Propose to eliminate those. You have these very strange multiple commercial districts that, again, percentages of only commercial uses that are allowed. They can fall into other districts. I don't know that you necessarily want to create a mixed use district that's only commercial. It doesn't really work with what's kind of going on now. And then we took a look at the form-based districts, and we think as we move forward with this and create kind of an appropriate district structure for the commercial, there may not be a need for these. We're going to try and integrate design as much as the state of Texas will allow us to. We understand there's rules, things like the building materials we can't touch. But really build it into everything so this need for this particular special type of district that's pretty complex as you look at it is no longer needed. And then we're in the kind of the stuff that gets a little bit easier to talk about. So the industrial districts want to make sure that come on. For industrial districts, these are really straightforward. You've got industrial areas. We want to treat them properly. We want to acknowledge things like, protections for areas that are currently industrial and then things that can come into place for areas that are transitioning. So it'll go. There we go. So the first is the light industrial. We think, you can combine this with the current industrial research district, the IR district, to create a new research and logistics district. The IM industrial manufacturing, just to rename this as the general industrial. This is really where that stuff goes. The IR research district, that's the one that we talked about, kind of combining that to create this, research and logistics district. A new flex commercial district. This is really where you see areas of old industrial starting to transition. There may be some guys that are still in there doing industrial level work, but that's where all of a sudden the doggy daycare is, the yoga studio opens, the microbrewery, usually that's one of the first ones are in there. So really to allow for that kind of mix of uses that's naturally happening and kind of keep them out of areas that, you want to reserve for industrial development. And then you have currently the CS Commercial Service District. We want to rename that as the Business Industrial, kind of a really kind of low-key industrial district with some commercial uses in there. And it's really just creating the scale of industrial that matches kind of what's out there and what's been happening. And then finally, the last set is coming up in a minute. The special purpose and the overlay districts. So I'm just going to start talking to these. A lot of this is fairly straightforward, in particular, the special purpose districts. So you've got agricultural, you've got the manufactured home, you've got the conservation districts. These are current special purpose districts. We're not proposing to make any changes to those, basically to leave those as is. We think you could benefit from two new ones. One is institutional, which would be kind of government buildings. Schools, large campuses, hospitals, basically those institutional uses that are not kind of integrated into urban areas so much as they're kind of bigger campus uses. So creating a district that cares about the edges and kind of lets the stuff in the middle kind of happen as it needs to happen for the institution, as well as an open space district to protect areas of open space. There's a couple things out there, and you'll see this term in this section, legacy districts. There are things that are on the map, but you can no longer apply for them. This is an existing thing in the current code. And you're not the only ones that have done this, so this isn't that weird. But we need to maintain them because there are areas that are still subject to them. except nobody can apply for anything new. They can't apply for that district. And this parking district, the P parking district, it's one of these legacy districts. In terms of the overlays, so these are areas where you're really trying to address one specific concern, things like the historic, the demolition delay, Turtle Creek, the neighborhood forest, the airport flight path, the neighborhood stabilization, maintaining these. We're not proposing any changes. And then just kind of a heads up of the legacy districts, you've got these the liquor districts and the modified delta, which is a parking thing. These would be legacy districts. You can't apply for them anymore, but they have to be out there. And then finally, a few overlays. The ID institutional district would become the new institutional district. So it moves from an overlay into a special purpose district. So it would have its own standards in place, again, to address the way campuses develop, which is a little bit different than other uses. There's this PM parking management district, which wouldn't really be no longer needed. I believe it's related to the form-based districts. Am I right? Am I remembering? Maybe.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and
Okay,
none
thank
exist
you.
out in the real world.
Okay. And then what we wanted to do is also consider elimination of the ADU overlay and allow ADUs as a use within the district. These are becoming obviously much more popular. Want to make sure we have allowances for them rather than through an overlay. And I think you saw in the diagnostic itself, there's kind of a lengthy discussion on that as well. So finally, the last few things, we just wanted to flag a couple of the things we're proposing throughout all of the districts. And that is how a lot of the zoning district controls work. A lot of this will be, part of it is kind of the foundational aspect is create those measurement methodologies I talked about 1,000 years ago that basically have that section that defines exactly, how you measure building height, how you measure lot width, how you measure setbacks, what are any specific exemptions, making sure all that's contained together. And then here it's really by looking at kind of, how can we address things that have been going on through just clarifying these dimensional standards. The first is creating the clear distinction between yard and setback. The yard is the area between the front of the building and the appropriate lot line. The setback's the minimum dimension. This is important because sometimes people set their houses back farther than the required minimum setback. So it's 20 feet, and I set it back 30 feet. That's your yard is 30, your setback's 20. If you say you can't have something in the required setback, technically, put it in that 10-foot area I just described in the difference between a setback and a yard. So somebody can try and squeeze a swimming pool in front of their house in a 10-foot setback. So that's why it's important. So we have controls that go throughout the code that talk about things like this. When we looked at the single family districts, we wanted to include a front setback averaging provision so that you better fit the context of the block that you're on. So rather than just a set standard, you can do an averaging of kind of two lots on either side of you so that you can fit in with everybody else. Make sure we have separate standards for interior side and rear setback. So create those dimensions. And again, this is intended to capture the character in place. This is really, we're trying to help here. We're not trying to kind of radically change the way things look. Similarly, a corner side setback. And then make sure that we clarify controls on building coverage, which is, everything, accessory structures and principal building, as well as an impervious surface maximum, which is everything else that's paved. So really making sure we put controls on that to really control the volume of the development on the lot. We also recommend to just measure building height in feet and get rid of stories. People can play games with stories. I've worked in some areas where all of a sudden a ceiling disappears, and it's no longer a half. We want to look at the maximum building heights for multifamily and non-residential. Again, that's something that's been a concern regarding, how can we build the appropriate density? How can development become feasible? We don't know what those numbers are, but we're looking through those. Two things unique here, the residential proximity slope and the tower spacing. I don't know that they're necessarily, the way that we looked at it, they're not really necessarily controlling those transitions. There's better ways to do this. They're very complex. The residential proximity slope in particular, I've never seen something like that. And it's very hard to manage. And I don't think it's getting necessarily what anybody really needs. It's just a control that's been in place. We recommend elimination of that. We don't we're not suggesting that there wouldn't be appropriate transitional controls between uses and heights and things like that, but there's easier, simpler ways to do that. We want to eliminate controls on the maximum number of dwelling units per acre. Kind of an older way of controlling density. We want to look at things like controlling by lot area where appropriate. Like I need, like single family, I need 5,000 square feet to build a single family home. FAR, everybody's really moving away from FAR. We also advocate for that. It's really not kind of getting the control. There's better ways to do this. And then including design standards within most of the districts, particularly commercial and mixed use, to make sure, development's meeting the basic bones. We're not trying to be the architecture police. We're not trying to impose anything like that. What we're really saying is here's the good bones of the building and the things that work, and they're objective standards. They're easy to kind of, for the applicant to figure out if they comply, and for those reviewing the plans to make sure compliance is achieved, but we don't want to get into architecture. And that's it. That's all we want to do with the districts. That's it. No biggie. I know that was a lot. I'm happy to slowly flip back to any slide that anybody would like to see. But obviously, we'd love to hear any questions, comments.
And I'd like to slip in again with a staff comment just to reiterate something Arista said. There, no decisions have been made to rezone any property right away, not near that point. And so we know that we've talked about ADUs, we've talked about setbacks, we've talked about a whole lot of things that have taken a lot of staff and community time in the past for code amendments or that kind of a thing to think through. And so no decisions have been made. What we are really valuing this process for, again, is a clear, concise perspective on the code as a system. And so some of these decisions, will be within that range. And become smaller depending on the detail. But the value that staff sees in this process is what works as a system. And there are certain challenges that consultants have brought out in our code that make it a dysfunctional system.
And just to build on it, thank you, Michael, because that reminded me of the other thing I wanted to say. And I kind of mentioned it in passing, but didn't really say it fully out. When you're doing a full code rewrite and you've got kind of guidance that Fort Dallas has given you, I went through a lot of things. We talked about these parallel districts, kind of new districts. What you can do now is build the tools. You can put the tools in the toolbox. So you can create districts that aren't going on the map right now. But when that type of development comes and that starts happening, you don't have to start. You're ready to go. You've got a district that would match what you want to see in that area, so it's basically making sure that, even when we get towards the end of the process, if there's any remappings, there may be some districts we create that you're not ready for yet, but it's better to have those good to go when something's coming, rather than try to, start integrating and making something from scratch.
Michael, why don't, because you can see I'm going to let you sort of be the traffic director on questions, but I think this is the time of the morning where we're going to take questions for as long as people have them. So thank you.
Sure. And we do have some other sections of presentation. I think
Yes.
we're working on districts right now and general standards.
Oh, okay.
But I do see some red lights. So I think Mr. McGregor.
Thank you. First, Michael, I'd like to say that the statement that you made about this is just sort of looking ahead and thinking no decision is being made here is extremely important for the public to understand, and for every statement made about this to lead with that. Otherwise, people will get very nervous, start printing out T-shirts and posters and all that. So yeah, thank you for making that statement. I have several questions. I think TODs are a really, really big deal. And as many of us know, I'll speak for myself. I think TODs can really move the needle in terms of creating a better city, both in terms of affordability and walkability and so forth. And developers shy away from them because of the rezoning. How do you envision? You touched on them, but how do you envision, at least conceptually, tackling TODs?
So what we envision for the full code update is to give you, and we found this to be kind of a useful way to do it. We did it in Baltimore originally, this ages ago, and then we did it in Charlotte, North Carolina, is to create kind of a tiered system of TOD-based districts. So let's say 4. We don't know what the number is just yet. But basically understanding that, TOD conceptually is the same everywhere. We want to, have walkable areas that easy access to the transit, face the transit, basic design standards. But in terms of kind of when you put them on the ground, some areas may not be appropriate for as much density as other areas. So basically you start with kind of a base TOD and then you build up a couple, 2, 3 more. With Charlotte, 4 or 5. 4. So that you've got the ability, it's that toolbox. You've got the ability, like when something's ready to go more density, okay, I can do TOD 3 now in this area. So that's what we've kind of conceptually envisioned, is that there'd be a scale of TOD districts. A lot of things a lot of things the same, a lot of design standards the same, a lot of things about, the way that you address the transit area would be the same, but kind of how it builds and its size would increase through that structure.
Okay. And I'd be remiss in my role as member of the board of DART that today we don't know whether DART will survive because of the legislative initiatives going on in Austin, but assuming it does survive, and we really don't know, then I'll be really interested in finding out more about TADs and working with you guys on that. Yeah, that was a big statement, but it's true.
Yeah, that's a little scary. Are you looking at that?
You also mentioned the central business district. My understanding, I'm not sure that this is correct, but it's already all under an existing PD. Most of downtown is. So would you be going in and remassaging or revisiting those PDs, or how does that work?
Yes, we will get to the larger PUD discussion in a moment, but if they are under PDs, those rights are vested. That's just the fact of life. The PUDs are there. The hope would be, and this is kind of preview of where we're going, that we can create a district that for whatever is left that's not in a PUD would be able to develop by right. I mean, the PUDs that are there, we can't reopen them. If whoever is the owner of the PUD would like to reopen them and look at them, that's up to them.
Okay. A couple more areas I want to touch on. A big issue in Dallas as we went through parking reform is a particular part of the city in Lower and Lewis Greenville where they use parking as a way to control the proliferation of bars or over proliferation of bars in the area because it's proximity to the single family community creates a problem for the basically drunks waking up in the front yard and so forth. Are you considering, is there any way to bake into the new zoning code a way to control the over proliferation of bars that doesn't require them to use parking for that? And I know it's a tough question because there's probably other issues related to this, which is, bars are really regulated by, tobacco and alcohol.
Yeah.
Commission.
Yeah, so there's really a couple. I mean, there is a couple things like kind of, and we would have to take a kind of closer look at what the liquor rules are. In terms of that, we have controlled bars before. One kind of issue that pops up is is it a bar? Is it a restaurant? So it's kind of getting that definition. If it serves food, okay, what if it only serves hot dogs and pickled eggs?
We have a similar definition on how much food.
Yeah, and it's hard to track. It's hard to track by percentages. It's is everybody going to bring in receipts every day? Is it by seating area, by service? There's ways to do it. It's not the easiest thing to control, in particular the bar restaurant thing. I mean, if you just don't want, if you just want to separate bars and restaurants from clustering, which isn't really advisable because it's, people want to go. There's ways to space them. There's nothing that says you can't space them out, but you're going to run into that issue with restaurant. What is it, a restaurant? Is it a bar?
It was such a big deal, and it is a big deal for some communities here that I would ask that I know it's going to take analysis and thought, but I would ask that you put it in your list of things to look into.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My last question is really quick. Did I understand in one of your last slides on ADUs that you're suggesting allowing ADUs by right? Is that the gist of what you're saying?
That's our recommendation.
Yeah,
We
yeah, I
understand the
understand.
sensitivity. We understand that you do.
I think it's a really good one, but it's
right
a,
now.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, good. All right. I didn't know what if I was walking into a landmine.
No, no, no. I'm on the YIMBY side of the equation, so,
Yeah, I mean, we see you're regulating now through it's in the ADU overlay,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's, I mean, and you can change it by district too. I mean, you can make ADUs permitted in some districts, all districts, certain size
Right, right, right,
districts,
okay.
things. I mean, our recommendation is just to make it easier, just to make them permitted where people are comfortable with them happening. You
Yeah.
know, why have to do a rezoning to allow them? You know, because the overlay would have to work that way.
Yeah, if my memory is correct right now, a community can choose to allow ADUs if they go through the process of, I forget what it's called, but you get 100 signatures and they sign and then they pay a fee. They opt into it. And
Yeah.
one thing that may be worth thinking about is the inverse of that, opting out of it. So allowed by right. If a community doesn't want it, then they go through that process to opt out.
Yeah.
It's just about, okay, that's all I have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think, I know we have Commissioner Wheeler Reagan online. Mr. Barron, did you have your light on? I think, so let's go Mr. Barron and then Ms. Wheeler Reagan.
Thank you. This is more of a use question, so I don't know if that's better for another section.
No, that's fine. We
Yeah.
we know everybody's not
I'm
going
trying
to
to
get
be
in the right
specific. I'm
section.
trying to be organized here with my notes and stuff. So we design a lot of infill housing, work with first-time investors that are trying to add a little bit of housing stock to the city. The regulations are very difficult to make that happen often. And so one question I have is, obviously nationally, there's a lot of conversation around missing middle. I think in Forward Dallas, we use the term community residential, something like that. So I'm very interested in aligning the zoning conversation with the building code conversation. And like banks, for example, look at 1 to 4 units as single family, right? But we define multifamily as starting at 3 units. I know there's a lot of conversation also on the building code side, even locally, around upping like up to 8 units allowed to be built under the residential code.
Wow.
So I'm curious if you have any recommendations on, like, my thought is create a, call it missing middle, call it whatever, but a 3 to 8 unit use type that is separate from the bigger multifamily. And then we can future elect to allow that use in residential districts, obviously it'd be by right in multifamily districts. But thinking about aligning what's happening with building code conversations, what banks look at, things like that. Like we have, we designed a triplex on a lot that's just sitting vacant because part of it's in a historic district and it, you know, requires a 35-foot front yard setback. So there's other issues there. But, you know, we've got engineering standards, for example, that apply the same in a lot of ways to a 3-unit building as to a 300-unit building, right? Driveway widths, parking standards, obviously. So I'm curious how you look at that small residential type that's in between single family and the big multifamily, if that would be an opportunity to create a separate use or how you look at that.
I'll let you jump in. We are, as you saw kind of in that slide, we're absolutely talking about kind of creating definitions up to a 4-plex. So that's kind of the 1 to 4 unit. That was a parallel set of districts. I know, Chris, you've been doing a lot with the building. I'll let you. I don't even know why I cut you off. I don't know.
Yeah, this is part of a typical process for us, and we always want to make sure that we're aligning as best we can with the building code. There are some ways, and I'm going to coach Arista's joke, that zoning and the building code are always going to show up at the top of the Empire State Building on different days. But to the extent that we can align what we're doing with things like uses and districts within the code, you know, if there's movement to look at things like up to 6 units, up to 8 units, we want to make sure that we're being responsive to that, right? So typically what we do is we would just define and allow those uses in certain places. So we might have a definition for single family, duplex, triplex. In other communities, we've done like a small plex home, which could be 3 to 4, a large plex home, which could be 5 to 6. We're looking at doing that in certain places specifically to align with, increases in the number of units that would fall under like the IRC as opposed to the IBC. So we're always kind of looking to make sure that we can ease those, because we don't want to create a situation where we're allowing something, but we're not actually feasibly ever going to see 4 units, because people are going to get kicked into the commercial code. And so we're only ever going to see 3 units in certain places. We want to make sure that to the extent we can, we're speaking the same language as the building code, for sure.
Okay, Commissioner Wheeler Reagan, are you online?
I am. So I was looking on the where you were saying I came in late, you all, so I'm so sorry. I'm new to ZOAC. So I saw where you all was talking about the floor ratio, and so just so happened something came up in a couple of maybe last week where we were looking at floor ratio in district. And mostly it's in the PD district. It was about 6 PD districts where ZOAC changed the floor ratio for live work. And I started having some complaints from some people about the live work ratio. If someone wanted to put an office in their home, the ratio now is 50-50 or 60-40, and essentially either they would have to build onto their house, or not have enough space for their family to live in it. And would that be a part of what you're talking about the floor ratio changes, elimination?
So Michael, I'm going to ask you, so do you have a percentage in the live work? I'm sorry, I don't know this off the top of my head.
So when live work first came out, I want to say it came out in 2013. It did not have those strict guidelines. We went to go find out when did it change. It changed in 2018, and it was based off of some other cities. So the ratio is either 50-50 or 60-40, but the 60-40 would be more for the commercial and less for the residential. But if someone needed just say an office space in their home and they wanted to get certificate of occupancy, they would have to, go to live work. They could always do it if they didn't want to put up signs and all that. But if they wanted to put up signs, then they would have to get a certificate of occupancy for live work. But the ratio drastically changed in 2018. For floor ratio was 60-40, and it seemed like that was extreme. If someone is living and want to have their family, especially since we now are in an age where people are working from home, that seems like a little extreme to have that. Would that be a part of a recommendation?
We didn't get into the specifics, but when we move into drafting, we will be looking at the definition of live work, how it functions. If the percentage of the, what can be the work versus what can be the live is not working or creating complications, we want to take a look at that, kind of tied into that, kind of how does it relate back to things like home occupations? Because as you said, a lot more people are working from home. And so we have to make sure that we're appropriately addressing that. So we will definitely take a look at that.
Okay, because again, in 2018, we were not where we was, but I also think when I believe when live work started in 2012, 2013, it was unregulated. So, had you all even looked and thought about it at all prior to now?
We had not delved specifically into the live work definition at this point.
Okay, because there are certain PDs, and if it needs to be, I sent over when it changed, but it was changed in 2018. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just in general too, one of the things that we're going to be looking at is those types of controls in certain situations, right? Where we're dealing with the percentage allocated of an interior space to one use versus another use. How is that actually administered? How is that monitored over time, right? Does the city have code officers, code enforcement going out and measuring on a regular basis in the interior of someone's live work unit to make sure they're meeting that percentage? So to the extent that we can kind of simplify the way that those things are handled and see if we can, pull those discrete percentages out, I think that's probably along the lines of what we would end up recommending.
And so after those recommendations, would that mean, because again, it was only to certain PDs. The biggest PD that I deal with is PD 595, which is the craziest PD we're working on. But it would say the recommendations go and then it goes before a city council. Would that automatically change it, update the requirements in the because to those different PDs that live work is in, because it's not in every area. It's only in certain PDs. But I want to say 6 to 8 PDs.
And this is Michael Wade. If it refers to the live work that's in the base code, if the PD refers to the live work that's in the base code, then it could change if we end up changing it. I'm seeing Patrick Blades and Megan Weinberg. Do you have more specific information on 595?
Well, I
Patrick,
have a kind of a clarifying question and a couple of statements. So 51A does not include a definition of live work. We do have a accessory live unit under accessory uses, and that is allowed without any percentage. The accessory live unit cannot exceed the floor area of the main non-residential use. So, Commissioner, I think you might be referring to, you mentioned PD 595, so that Patrick is here, and that may have been why he's nodding. There may be some percentages there which would not be affected by any, if it's separately defined in PD 595, it would not be affected by what we do in 51A. But I'm turning it over to Patrick now.
So Patrick the reason why Patrick probably about to comment is because I discovered it last week. I'm probably one of the first people to ever have a live working. When we first adopted it back in 2012, we didn't have the same ratio, 28. But I found out because a couple of people were trying to move toward that. Patrick, I think, or you aware that I sent this to Lindsay last week and sent the ZOAC information as it relates to that?
Yes, Patrick Blades, Chief Planner for Neighborhood and Community Planning. Yes, Commissioner Wheeler, did get that comment from Lindsay. And what I will say in regards to 595, 2 things. First, so there are a number of things in 59 in that PED that refer back to our base code. So when any changes that go through ZOAC and CPC and council with Camiris, it would refer back to that. I would also say that there's a lot of underlying thought that Camiris has done, where we've incorporated some of that thought into the rewrite of 595. So like where they're talking about those percentages of sometimes it's almost an arbitrary percentage. That same thought process is going into the area plan and the changes in 595. So like the percentage of live work unit in that PED, that would be changed. And again, it's reflective of some of this, the research that they've done and the thought leadership they've done nationally, that we have incorporated that into the recommendations for the changes in 595.
Okay, and Patrick, are you aware it's in that when this was done, it refers to PD 316, 17, 468, 595, 714, 808, 811, 812, 891, 908, and 929. Those are all the PDs that it affected.
So we can definitely take a look at each one of those PDs and see how they're written and see if what Camiris is talking about in the recommendations for an update, if it would change those PDs or if we'd have to specifically change those PDs. So 100% we can look into the ones that you have just cited. Yes, ma'am.
And so this is my last question since is there a way now in the area plan for that recommendation to go into PD 595 since there is already an open area plan that's on the cusp of that, or would we need to wait?
Yes, Commissioner, we've included it. Yes, ma'am.
No, the changes for the 60-40 or 50-50.
Yes, Commissioner. The updated draft of the plan is going to include that. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Mr. Cardin.
Hello. I had a few questions, but well, not that many, don't worry. But before we get into that, just so I understand, magic wand scenario, things go smoothly, right? this gets to council, it's approved, I'm sorry. And how do you see, for the uses that you talked about transitioning, whether it's residential or light industrial, transitioning to some new merged district, at the time that this policy is approved, would all of those uses transfer from, say, call it 51A to 51B essentially, or would it, how do you see that transfer process occurring? Do they change to this new zoning automatically, or how does that work?
Not a simple question. It all kind of depends on what happened. When we talk about, if we're talking specifically about uses, in particular, when we're talking about uses in Texas, because you've got these nonconformity laws that surround everything that came out of the state that we have to be mindful of. You know, the intent is if we're talking about how things are, how we transition a district from one to the other, the intent is really to capture if we're moving something to another district, and this is all theoretical at this point, we're trying to move it to that district because that fits the character better. That's really our goal here, is really not to kind of, and maybe I'm not getting at the question correctly.
Mr. Carden, are you asking about sort of an authorized hearing process versus an automatic, just have it changes, or?
Yeah, does it, so if a vote happens, you add in these, like the industrial research district,
Okay.
I think you talked about, from would all light industrial in the city, for example, immediately transition to this new industrial research district since you're phasing it out and you didn't specify it as, say, a legacy district?
So we would need to look at a couple of things, and there's just a couple of complications here, but it would be many times districts end up being equivalenced. So an even easier example, when we redo a residential district structure, we'll often redo it so that it's called something like RN1 rather than R1 to signify that it's changed. But the RN1 really equates to the R1. It's just a name change with some enhancements to it. So basically we call it equivalencing. So RN1 becomes R1 becomes RN1, R2 becomes RN2, and it's basically because we've upgraded. And this is hypothetical, not related to Dallas at all. And so a lot of times there's equivalences. We need to look at how this plays out legally here and what is technically considered a rezoning. This is kind of getting in the weeds a bit, but what's considered a rezoning, and with it being a rezoning, what is the notice requirement? So in most places, you can just say I1 is now IR, and the commercial service is now IMU, and the district's changed entirely. Most places you can do that. Because of statute here, we have to be a little bit more careful. So the question is, the answer is, I'd like it to be easy, but we don't have the full picture yet. We're hoping some other city will challenge the state and make them clarify it, but we're in the process of doing this and then get an answer at the end.
Okay, thank you. That still helps. There are three subjects related to that then. So the light industrial, for example, and just industrial uses in general, but mainly the light industrial. Unfortunately, for a city of Dallas' size and age, some of the zoning policies historically have been questionable in their use and applications to parts of the city, particularly as it pertains to minority areas. To this day, we do have some light industrial and other more intense industrial zoning that exists on paper, but is essentially paralyzed because our own complexity of our code also not only paralyzes their commercial districts that they do want, it also paralyzes the industrial districts that they may not want. If the code is corrected, then I think there would be this concern that the light industrial will transition to not only be useful, but it will actually be more intense in its industrial application. And so how do you kind of see that playing out, or in particular with these more sensitive uses when you're dealing with, we'll call them underserved areas of the city?
So that's something that it's got a number of different, you tackle it in a number of different ways. Some of it is really looking at, what districts do we have? What what impacts can we mitigate when there's adjacencies? So when industrial is adjacent to residential, or you've got these areas of conflict that maybe industrial is not appropriate. Obviously, certain things we need to keep in mind, things like the creation of nonconformities and all of that. That's kind of a legal aspect of it. So the first one is just kind of taking a look at the text. The second is having these conversations around the map. We advise and we can help you articulate policy. We need directions. We're not here to tell you kind of what to do. That's kind of a nice and a not nice part of doing zoning work. We're here to help implement the city's policy. So we facilitate those discussions and see if there's something within the district that or kind of any kind of transition or adjacency issues that need to be addressed. But then it may just be looking at the map and seeing how that divides up. And I can't speak to what we would do yet. I don't know.
I would just add in there, this is where Forward Dallas is the big player. I mean, I know it's relatively new for us to have a legally an authoritative guiding land use map, land use category place type map. Extremely important that process was because of this. We have small area plans. And then in addition to all of that, we've also talked about some other districts, flex industrial, and some of these that are very intentionally buffer areas. And so that's really where Forward Dallas staff will come into play. We have environmental justice and sustainability implementation team going on right now with our department partnering with the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. And so we're very sensitive. I mean, we've talked about being a little bit careful. We're being very careful on exactly that topic.
Okay. The other two questions are lighter. We'll put it that way. So townhomes. Dallas has a lot of townhomes. Their positioning on the street is sometimes questionable.
We're talking about
our good old
shared access.
Shared access, yes. Spot townhomes, as some cities will call them. And then we also have some of our narrow lot single family homes that some might even call townhomes with a couple of feet of spacing. At least recently, in practice, what we've seen developers do is that when they want narrow lot single family, they're using our quote unquote townhome zoning, usually townhome 3. And when they want small scale townhomes that are like attached, we see that really applied in MF1 and MF2, but almost exclusively MF2. So with this code rework, do you kind of see this going where the developers or developments that were using TH3 start to use more of, say, this R3000, this R3, R3000 we're looking at, and then the actual townhome developments with perhaps some better design standards start to use this new townhome district so that the language matches what they're actually doing?
I would think yes. I mean, yeah. The intent here is it really seems like, the development forms within the code now aren't clearly defined. They're kind of slippery. I had some struggles trying to figure out what was allowed where. So what we want to do, what we recommend is really, let's define each of those. Let's define the districts where they're appropriate and let's build the standards around them. So there would be like a real townhome district. Townhomes may be allowed in other districts, but there'd be standards kind of tailored to that.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of what we've been talking about in terms of clarity and predictability, right? I mean, the idea here is to get around these kinds of workarounds where you're doing single family in the townhome district, and then in order to do townhomes, you're using the multifamily district, right? I think we want to kind of align things so that we can say, this is the place for these. Here are the rules around these. There's no longer these workarounds that you have to do. This is the tool to get this type of development done.
Got it. And then the last question is on TOD. I'm not on the dartboard, but I do keep a pretty close eye on DART and TOD and all that. Dallas seems to have a habit of not amplifying its efforts, particularly around its rail stations. In other words, if you look for high density development or large scale mixed use, there seems to be no rhyme or reason as to whether it's close to a rail station or not. It's just luck, if you will. Can you talk about the rationale a little bit more between creating TOD districts, which again, you have to go to that zoning question, and is this a zoning change, and actually getting developers to use the tool versus creating an amplifier, as in like if you're within a half-mile radius of TOD or quarter, whatever it is, you automatically get these enhancements to whatever your code is. In other words, new instrument versus sound amplifier, if you will.
Mhm. You look like you wanted to talk, Michael, so I mean, I'm happy to do it. But...
Well, I mean, from a staff perspective, we're very interested in both of these methods, and our director especially in the second one, where you're zoned to whatever else you are, regardless of, you know, it's an R, it's a WMU, whatever, and then if you're abutting a rail station or you're within a certain distance, it's kind of reactionary. I think some people have called it floating zoning, but I think that might be something a little bit different. But as staff, we're very interested in that. No one's come down decisively on we're going to use overlay districts or base districts, that kind of a thing. I will say we're working on a couple of early implementation items, and one of those is just TOD overlay zones. That is just a code amendment for a little faster movement, so that maybe there's some changes before the full code reform is adopted. And we sort of landed on that because that gives us multiple options for the full code reform going forward. And so I think it's easy for us to think in terms of a district. It's an object. We think in terms of Dart typologies. They've got their ones, and we reference them in Forward Dallas. It's easy to draw the boundaries in the same places, but we're very open to creative solutions as well.
And I would just chime in too. I think, you know, there are kind of advantages to both approaches. You know, obviously it's easier to say, you know, within X distance of a DART station, you get this much extra height. You don't have parking required, you know, whatever it ends up being. The thing that gets difficult with that type of approach is distinguishing between, you know, not all DART stations are the same. You know, should we allow the same height at a DART station far north Dallas that we would closer to downtown, for instance? You know, so a district structure allows us to have a little bit more nuanced approach with something like that. Whereas, you know, if it was just sort of this proximity approach where you're stretching out these additional permissions based on, you know, how close you are to a DART station, you're a little bit more hamstrung in terms of being able to kind of add that nuance in. So we're looking at both approaches, though we don't have any decisions to make yet.
Okay, thank you. And I can understand just from that, for example, the radius, you know, if you say everything has an amplifier, but then you try to define it, then you just create this almost whole subcode of, you know, how much each use is amplified by being next to a rail station, which, yeah, I can see that concern. And I guess the other thing, just from a radius standpoint versus this TOD, just the complexity or the perceived complexity of rezoning or adjusting zoning around these areas, getting the radius, I guess, basically getting, you know, even when we talk about, I know it sounds crazy now with DART and crisis, new construction, just as, I guess, this understanding that, hey, if you have higher order pedestrian or transit infrastructure, you should understand that it automatically will come with this expectation. Whereas we may see, you know, in some cases, and not just Dallas, other cities too, where we'd have the infrastructure that mismatches with, like, say, park and ride versus, you know, this multi-billion-dollar rail system or infrastructure. So I guess, yeah, I can understand that, but I definitely would want to learn more as we go through this process of how do we ensure our city's higher order investments, really in general, are reflected in the zoning reform.
Thank you. I think I see Mr. Rubin online.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Wade, Chair Housewright. I wanted to follow up on some of the discussion that Mr. Cardin started on sort of the environmental justice piece. I had the pleasure of chairing the comp plan committee, and, you know, while I think there was broad consensus on what we ended up, you know, doing on environmental justice, and it seemed like we were all sort of, you know, moving in the same direction throughout the process, it was very, you know, involved and detailed, and I just see a few things in the slides that I want to make sure that I flag for y'all, because a few things maybe feel like they're a little bit in tension with Forward Dallas. The first is I think we want to be very clear in calling out where our most, the districts for the most noxious sort of, you know, industrial uses are, the batch plants, the concrete crushing. I think one thing that was really important to us was sort of a truth in advertising approach about how we label it. We have IR, we have IM. I think how we label it is super important. One other thought is, for a while the discussion focused on, okay, the thing that we're really concerned about are sort of the, noxious, with industrial uses with sort of emissions. But what really came out of the process is there was also a lot of concern with the large scale warehouses. So, I think if we go back to whatever slide covered industrial, there was sort of a logistics and research district being proposed. And in Forward Dallas, we had talked about having a logistics hub place type for the larger scale logistics, because there are a lot of issues in terms of heavy truck traffic, particulates, matters, being involved with these large scale logistics centers. So, I do think we need to be thoughtful about, this research and logistics district. I have some, big concerns about whether we want to go down that path or not. It may be a logistics district really focusing on the heavy logistics uses, and then, some other district focused on, smaller warehouses and research uses. So I just wanted to make sure I made those comments up front as we approach this, because I do think we will, run into some pretty severe concerns if we don't very, very carefully, approach these industrial districts. Then I do have a question. We had several policy goals in the environmental justice section of Forward Dallas, and I know Mr. Wade mentioned in connection with TODs, maybe putting certain, code changes out in front of the larger code reform process. Has there been any discussion of implementing any of the environmental justice goals in Forward Dallas ahead of the actual full-scale code rewrite?
As yet, we've focused on TOD and a couple of other items, but I think we're happy to consider what might be done on a faster timeline. A couple of other items are simply, they lend themselves to easier and faster amendment, but this is an extremely important priority of the cities, and so I think we're happy to look at that.
Well, I would love to have further discussions about whether some of the EJ goals can be, put ahead of the whole full-scale code rewrite, because I think they're, not just important, but time sensitive, given the incompatibility of some, industrial and residential uses in the southern section of West Dallas. Final thing I just wanted to mention is, I am all about taking a look at RPS. I think it's a very blunt instrument, trying to achieve compatibility. When we open up that discussion, I would just, ask the consultants and staff if we can have, the option or options, on the table very early on in the process on how to address, height and compatibility. I think that would really help facilitate that discussion, as opposed to just a line item, that says we need to get rid of RPS, because I think the intent of RPS is good, but how it plays out in practice doesn't always, work out well. So would love to see those additional options, at least, sketched in rough form very early in the process.
Okay. Anyone else? I think we're good to go.
All right, so on to some of the other stuff, whenever it chooses to appear. General development standards. So this is really kind of everything else that's happening on a site. Oftentimes you know, you'll see, this is kind of your accessory structures, this is your parking, this is your loading. So here we have kind of the first chapter, if you remember back in the organization, would be general development standards. That's where you see things like site triangles, your control on fences, how you control mechanical equipment, mainly the screening of the mechanical equipment, any kind of special regulations that may be lurking out there. So really just to bring them all together in one section that, you know, lets you flag it and say, hey, you know, this is all in here. I need to pay attention to this when I'm doing development as well. Things like exterior lighting controls. We want to do something that can help to prevent light trespass, light pollution, not going so far as to, you know, make enforcement or verification of meeting the standards very difficult. There's ways to do this that keeps it kind of simple, but really does help with the pollution and glare issues. And then making sure we're addressing the full range of accessory structures. So things like the location and the height, you know, how are detached garages controlled, what happens with apiaries, what happens with solar panels, making sure that we've got all those standards in place as to where you can put them on the lot. In addition to this, what we also would like to control is things that we call the permitted encroachments. And in a minute, it'll be up there. There it goes. This table is an example. This is not Dallas. This is taken from somebody else. But just to show kind of looking at, you know, permitted encroachments into required setbacks. Seems like a very minor thing, but it's actually quite important. Permitted encroachments are basically things like how much can my eaves go into a required setback? How much can my chimney? How much can my bay window? A lot of these are really the architectural features of a home. By allowing them some kind of minimal encroachment into the required setback, that gives more area to build, which means you're encouraged to do these kind of things, which make nicer looking homes. And so we just want to make sure that we've got a table that says, hey, you can do this. You'll get articulation, you'll get shadowing, you'll get this. But if you have to push back into the setback, you're not going to do them because you're going to be minimizing, you're going to be taking out valuable space. So that's what's so important about the permitted encroachment section. And organizing it in the table keeps it really easy to understand. The next two that are going to pop up are parking and landscape. So we know that parking controls are currently undergoing the update, or they have undergone the update. So we'll be integrating them into this code. Our role is really not to kind of change those unless directed to do so. It would be in alignment with kind of just making sure we're aligning with the rest of the code. So like I said earlier, everybody's speaking the same language. Similarly to that, it's landscape. What we want to do is look at that. You know, there's a general approach here is really alignment. We know it's been recently updated, so we're going to work with those that did that to make sure it aligns with kind of the rest of the code. We want to make sure we're going to reevaluate it, you know, as it goes on, and make sure that the following site areas are addressed. I think these are probably the most important landscape areas: the perimeter of parking lots, the interior of parking lots, as well as buffer yards between incompatible uses. That's another thing that talks about transition. So making sure when I am, you know, adjacent to a non-residential use and I'm a lower density residential district, that I've got a proper buffer yard that helps to mitigate some of that. So, so that was kind of very basic section. I don't know if we have any comments or questions on it.
I would actually like to just fill in. I know that this body dealt with parking for a long time, so I think it's apropos just to give a very bullet pointed summary of what's happened recently. City Plan Commission has recommended a proposal to City Council. It doesn't look like what this body recommended, which was no minimums with transportation demand management plan and design standards. It is reduced minimums and no minimums for a good area of the land. So multifamily, they're recommending half a space per dwelling unit rather than one space per bedroom, which is a huge reduction. Most industrial, office, commercial properties around the city will have no minimums, with some carve outs when you're around single family. What else? Single family and duplex, one space per dwelling unit. No minimums within a half mile of a rail station, light rail or streetcar. No minimums downtown. And so still achieving quite a bit. And I can fill this body in on details later on. But the way that plugs into this is we'll still, you know, the code reform won't be able to simply leave out the issue of parking minimums. Those will be factored in as we're creating the new code.
Okay. On to signs. So signs are interesting nowadays. There's kind of a very key thing that signs need to be content neutral. Two different Supreme Court rulings came down, Reed Gilbert and Austin Reagan. I haven't read. So essentially we can't control any of the content of a sign. What we can still distinguish though is whether, and it's been upheld, even though there's arguing amongst the judges, on-premise versus off-premise being billboards, and then commercial versus non-commercial messages. But beyond that distinction, really can't do much with that. So we want to reorganize the sign regulations so that, you know, they're very clear in terms of how they function, the purpose, some general standards, things like construction standards, materials, those types of things, illumination, and then really list out the types of signs that are out there. Exempt signs, which are signs that are allowed with standards, but no permit is required. Signs that do require a permit, and then those that are prohibited. You have this great thing in place already. We didn't have to recommend it. The extraordinarily significant signs. I love that term. Usually it's just called classic signs, but extraordinarily significant is really fun. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining that, as well as, again, like I talked about, all those special sign plans you have that take up the bulk of the chapter to be moved to an appendix. They remain in effect, but they're, but just basically put them someplace a little farther away from everything else. We're looking at a new approach to sign controls. So really what you've got now, things are organized as attached versus detached. We really don't think that gets at the kind of specific context of the district. So you want the signs you allow to match with the form that you allow within a district. So we want to align those a little bit better. So really looking at regulating them by their specific type and then relating them back to the districts. Some districts may allow certain types of signs, some may not. And then really we're matching that district form and maintaining a consistent visual character. We just put these signs up here so you can see, but these are fairly typical signs that require a permit, things like awnings, attached banners, canopies, ground signs, marquees, projecting signs, roof signs, skyline signs, wall signs, everything you kind of think of. And then typical ones that are exempt, usually based on some kind of activity happening on the site, whether it's construction or real estate activity. And other things like window signs, you know, basically putting standards around them. Now that's to say everything there would have standards around it. So it's not like it's just a free for all, but we think it's a kind of very logical system to organizing signs. Oh, I really thought it would flip right when I needed it to. I've been trying to get ahead of this. So that's really everything that we've got on signs. And then I don't know if there's any additional questions. I know we all get very excited about a sign code. Ask Chris; he's done a bunch lately.
I'll ask a question. I know you noted these really complex special purpose sign districts we have, and your recommendation is that we do away with those, or what?
We can't do away with them because they're approved and they have special standards. My suggestion is to move them to the back of the code as an appendix. They're in place, they're enforced. There's nothing, I mean, they've been approved. If one of those sign folks would like to come and, you know, repeal their special approval because the new sign code works really well, that'd be great, but we can't take them away. But we don't need them kind of overwhelming the actual regulations. Okay.
Actually, I have a question. Not being super familiar with our own sign code, and we have a different body that kind of looks at sign approvals and that kind of thing. Are those districts, do they refer to our code in the same way that a PD sometimes refers to the code? You know, as we look at changing the base code, will that fundamentally change those sign districts? Or do they have all of their standards within the district?
I don't know. That's my answer. We would need to take a look at that. I mean, we want to make sure that everything we've got in the code aligns with it. So if there's something we need to update in them that's really just in alignment, we can tackle that as well. Okay. So the last section of the code, the administration section, well, really there's two last sections, this and nonconformities. We want to clarify the process. We want to be clear on kind of who does what. How do I do it? What happens when I've done it? And then how do I proceed once I've been approved or denied? So that's kind of our structure for organizing the administrative section. So you'll see here the 4 articles kind of reflect that. Couple of changes we've proposed. We understand in the administration section, a lot of times this is all kind of dictated by the state. This is nothing to do with it being Texas. This is every state. They've got their rules in place for how you're allowed to do things. The first is variances. We always recommend don't put any limitations on the kinds of variances that can be applied for. The variance just by its nature is, I don't know what it is. I don't know why I can't do it on this lot. You can't kind of limit it that way. Most places don't put these limitations are, those who have them are kind of taking them off, basically to give that flexibility in place. We also think an administrative modification would be a great tool to have here. This is really looking at allowing administratively by the zoning administrator or whoever the person may be to make a modification of 10% or less to any dimensional standard in the code. That will take kind of a lot of the small guys out of it, kind of frees up time for the bodies making these reviews and approvals, and really provides this smaller, quicker flexibility. Particularly, you'll see it a lot in kind of single family areas where the lot's a little weird and they need a 1-foot reduction in the setback. Let's create an easy process for that. So that's really what we're looking at there. Site plan review, we want to make sure this process is clear, so we're continuing to evaluate the triggers required for site plan review. Again, as we talked about way back in the uses, the DRI and the RAR are really looking at site plan reviews. We're looking to replace those with use standards. Some of your triggers require a high traffic threshold, 6,000 trips per day, 500 trips per acre. This threshold may be too high. The calculation is complex. Jesus. So what we want to do is look at site plan review and look at where it would be required by the size of the development, by alterations, expansions for certain types of uses. Let's just make it more clear is really where we want to get to in the site plan review process. We took a look at subdivision. Basically, you've got a fairly standard set of subdivision regulations. The one thing that jumped out immediately to us is this current provision of lots must conform in width, depth, and area to the pattern already established in adjacent areas having due regard to the character of the area. This is atypical for subdivision. Subdivision is a process in which a lot is divided into 2 or more lots or consolidated into 1 lot and subject to the standards of the zoning district in which it lives. That's subdivision. So this is atypical. The language here, and I'm going to read what I wrote. The language here is vague, subjective, and open interpretation. What defines conforming and having due regard? We think this subjectivity can lead to inconsistent applications of the regulations. This leaves room for bias, arbitrary decisions, and you can put you at risk for legal challenges. Subdivision is a process of dividing land. It's not there to make calculations on whether this lot, which meets the zoning district standards, fits. If it's not appropriate to divide it, you need to look at that zoning district and you need to look at the zoning of the lot, not use the subdivision process. And that's probably the meanest I've sounded in this whole presentation. This kind of gets to me a little bit. And then finally, this is something, we've mentioned this. You rely on PD a lot, 1,200, 1,100 counting PDs going on. It is a good zoning tool. It has its place. It is something that can be used for innovative developments. It allows for those modifications to base zoning. But what we've seen here and what's been evident to us is that it changed beyond their original intent. Now they're just being used as a workaround for parts of the code that just don't work, or filling in controversial uses or gaps in the zoning, or becoming a kind of the default way of doing zoning. And we don't want that. There's a lot of problems. First of all, PDs aren't cheap. Takes a lot of time for developers and for staff to go through this and the city itself to approve them. It can be uncertain in terms of what gets approved at the end. And then if we're going to talk about wanting to maintain a code that's easy to enforce, that we can go around, it doesn't help to have 1,100 plus little mini zoning codes sitting around the city. So that means your code enforcement needs to figure out every time, well, in the rest of the city, I could do this, but in this one PD, they can't do this. And that just creates a burden. And it's not going to you're going to be nitpicking rather than getting at big code enforcement issues that you want to. So that is kind of the concern. So how do we solve this? So we can't make PDs go away. But I think a couple of things can happen here. We can create a responsive district and use structure. That's what we've really been talking about. Let's let the code do the things that PDs have been trying to do. Let's turn the common conditions we add onto PDs into standards within the code. So you don't have to worry about that, in particular with controversial uses. And then some more flexibilities like the administrative modification I talked about. You know, really one of the other things is an alternate approach to how PD is handled. Currently, it's treated as a district. We think it can be treated as an approval procedure. You know, it's similar to how it is now, but a little bit different. Basically, underlying district standards, including the uses, they all apply unless it's modified as part of the PD approval. It creates predictability. PDs based on the underlying district, the approval lays on top of it. Again, similar to how it is now. But really what happens is if with it being an approval process, if it's not acted upon in 2 years, it just disappears. And the district that you've got underneath remains without you having to do anything. It just expires. So it works off a base that makes these negotiations clear for all. So really what that is, it's really just letting people, I worked in a place before where people were getting PDs just to increase the value of the land and never acting upon them. And because there's no expiration date tied to it, because it's a rezoning of the district and it's a bigger process to do it, they would just wait to sell the land to the guy, like, hey, you can buy this, but I'm already approved for, 15 stories. So here's, take my money. What we want is something that says if everybody's going through this trouble, the people who live around the PD, the people making the PD, the people at the city reviewing the PD, the people who are going to be enforcing the PD, let's make sure that you're going at this with clear intent. And if you don't act in, say 2 years, you just lose that approval. There's ways to build in to allow for additional timeframes, but that is the benefit of moving to an approval. And so with that, I'm going to zip through nonconformities so that we can kind of do all the admin stuff together because there's not much. Actually, I think this might be the last slide. Kind of the other section of the code, what we're working on, and we understand certain things are going on here at the state level regarding how nonconforming uses in particular are treated. We want to make sure that we're treating all the different types of nonconformities appropriate so that we're trying to get rid of as many as possible. We don't want to create new ones. We want to eliminate them as much as possible. But we want to make sure for those that remain, which is inevitable, that, the different types are addressed. So this would be uses, structures, site characteristic, which is things like exterior lighting or parking design, non-conforming lots and non-conforming signs, and make sure the rules around each of those are very kind of they're very set. I understand what I can do if I'm in one of these situations. The second thing is really the potential new permission. This is something for single family and two family or single family duplex non-conformities. It's a permission to allow a house to be altered that may be non-conforming in one of two conditions. Either the house is set back further into the rear setback than is allowed. So I have a 20-foot rear setback and I only have 15. My house sits on 15. Or it's the interior side. I'm supposed to be 5 feet away. I'm only 4 feet away. And to allow them to make improvements that extend the house with an addition, either vertically, probably the easiest to understand. I want to put a second floor on my house. I meet everything else except for this rear setback. And basically allowing for that to happen without a variance. What we have found, because this is really limited to single family and two family, is that really encourages kind of maintenance of a lot of the existing housing stock, which can be, its life can be extended because there's more room. It kind of maintains this natural kind of shores up this amount of affordable housing in this housing stock because it can be approved upon without having to fight all these things out. And we've seen it benefit a lot of places, big and small, as we've used it for a number of years now. So this is a potential new permission. It's basically just letting you kind of meeting everything else except this one condition to build in plane with the rest of the house. And with that, we ended on administration. So happy to take questions on that or any other part of the documents.
Mr. Carden, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. Can you go back to the PD page?
This is trouble.
Oh, I knew it was
No.
trouble.
All right, let's see when it gets here.
But while it's loading up, I had a couple of questions on that and just some, I guess, things that staff and consultants to just consider. So I understood that you talked about doing this kind of overlay. So you have a base code and then the PD kind of lays over it. And the thing is, a lot of our PDs, if you had a chance to look at them, actually do work like that. It follows MF2 with the following changes, or it follows this with the following changes.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I guess I've seen it where like the time we talked about, it may have just been a number like the 2 years, but I'm like, I've seen developments that are PDs that it can take 2 years just to build the infrastructure to build, to even begin to go vertical.
The intent is not to be complete in 2 years.
Right.
When I use 2 years as an example, I got the PD approval and I've been in sunny Florida for 2 years and haven't even looked at the ground I purchased.
Okay, so it's kind of a no
You're
stall
not acting,
clause.
you're not doing anything.
Right. I would say that's definitely going to be something I can see some concerns with, just because, I mean, with economic cycles and everything else, like, hey, if you spent, hopefully it's smoother, but in many cases, developers are spending tens and often hundreds of thousands of dollars on getting these PDs, and to go through that process and time consumption, and then only find out, oh, your timer is running close because there's some macroeconomic factor that's beyond the scope of this zoning rewrite and beyond the scope of the city that delays it. It just seems like an extra. I can see that being perceived as an extra burden.
And to be clear, when you write these out, this is really intended to catch the folks that aren't doing it. When you write this out in actual code language, there is flexibility to extend that period. If you, in good faith, show that you've been pursuing something or other and it's just, these are the issues, most typically, it's just an administrative approval that says, yeah, okay, 2 more years. Here you go. So it's not super strict. It's really meant to catch folks that just don't have any intention of really acting upon it.
Right. And yeah, I can see that as it goes through the public process. I can definitely see that one coming back, because I can imagine it being almost similar to the SUB discussion, in that, you know, that gets reformed and this gets added in. The other thing too is that when we look at these PDs and just how they're used currently in the city, and just rezoning in general, typically many of our most popular areas, Bishop Arts, Lower Greenville, so on and so forth, a lot of them are under PDs. And because of our code and because they've been used as workaround, what's effectively happened is that areas where there's enough value, in other words, higher income, higher value areas, get the development resource to create these well-planned PDs, and smaller scale developments that may also need this level of detail because of that cost or complexity, just they don't get approached at all. So in the current code right now, the existing base code doesn't work, and if a developer wants to do a small scale development that would require PD, the level of detail that they have to go through could be so intense that they just don't do it. Or if they do have the skill to do it, the question then becomes, well, why would you spend all those resources on, say, a half acre or 1 acre site when you could spend those same resources on a 3 acre site in some more prime area? And this can create inequities. So how does, I guess all that to say, if this tool is getting reformed, how do we make it, how does you see it being reformed where it's more accessible to smaller developers, more local developers, or just people in the community who want to make some adjustments, but they just don't have the scale or the technical sophistication of, say, a much larger developer?
Well, I think there's a couple things in there. Number one, I think the code for the type of development you want to see and the type of development they want to make, you shouldn't need a PD. And that's number one. That's where we're trying to get to at the end of the day with this whole big project. I mean, it's not just focused on PD, but it's really trying to get to the end where, you know, the district the code lets you do the good stuff and you don't need the complexity of a PD. And PD should be relegated back to its role as something for really crazy, innovative, new things that, need a lot of different things. It needs to be refocused so that it's achieving that goal. It's encouraging, it's a means for innovation to happen. So I think that's one thing. So I'm kind of flipping what you said on its head. For the small guys, the code should be clear enough to let them do it without having to go through the complexity of the PD approval. That's where we want to get to. And it should really, I mean, this is going to be something we're going to, it's a thread that's going to run through this whole process of kind of weaning Dallas off the PD process. I mean, it's a cultural shift that we're asking to happen here. But, it's been done before. I don't know if you had anything there.
I mean, I can totally see what you're saying in terms of the kind of inequity of how it works currently, right? Because if you don't have the time or if you don't have the resources to be able to achieve something that you can currently only achieve through PD, that door is just kind of closed to you. And I think, just to echo what Arista's saying, we're hoping to build in enough flexibility and enough other options that you don't have to go through the PD process. If you have 1 acre, you want to do something a little bit different, that flexibility is just built in. That PD would be this higher tier of, you are doing something that's different enough that you want to invest that time, that the city wants to invest that time, that it's a negotiation that you're entering into. Leveling the playing field through just the base code, I think, can alleviate a lot of that tension.
And I would, as staff, add on to that, just like you mentioned, so many PDs are based on our base code that when the time comes for where a PD really is justified, as we get the base code straightened out, someone won't have to be as conversant in the mess that we have today in order to create this with staff.
And then to that same effort, I did notice in here, I'm trying to find it, but there was something about development impact. I think it's about the number of trips where you may want to, do a study or something. In our current process for rezoning, we have a threshold that's much lower. I want to say it's like 1,000 trips per day in terms of when you need to do a traffic study. And that's one of those things where we mentioned earlier about this doesn't necessarily change all the zoning everywhere all at once. But there's still those inequities that small developers, even if they're not changing to a PD, when they're looking at changing from just bad zoning to better zoning, more aligned with Fort Dallas, they may want to look at. But a traffic study, for example, is a $15,000 dice roll. Well, if you're doing a 50 by 150 little commercial retail live work unit, that's a lot to roll the dice on for these smaller developers, when it effectively, it's again one of those little layers that almost has the same impact as the PD, where it's like, just do not pass. Is that something that this process is going to look at about triggering that? Like, okay, does it really make sense to have that same? Does 1,000 trips per day? If it's 1,000 trips per day, but it's also next to a rail station, does it really need to be the threshold at 1,000, or does it need to be 2, or whatever that threshold is?
Yes, we will be looking anywhere that this code requires a traffic study to create a threshold. I will be honest about my bias. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think they're not. It's a traffic study, but that's not I mean, it has some utility if you're doing a larger development and you need to figure out kind of the street infrastructure around it. But if the streets are there already and things are happening, why are we using it as a threshold for site plan review for zoning? It sounds like it's used in rezoning. I think there's other ways to create thresholds or standards, depending on which one we're talking about. If we're talking about it as a standard, we're talking about it as a threshold, that are far more concrete, relate more to what's going on, and are kind of more fine-tuned to the activities and what's being required, rather than, I've always found traffic studies in these cases, when you're looking at it for, say, site plan review or as a rezoning standard, to be a little arbitrary. I'm revealing my full-on bias here. The city and everybody wants us to start putting them back in. That can come up as a discussion, but I think really from my initial thinking would be that let's really look at them and really see if we need them.
Sure. A couple of random items that I wonder if you'll tackle. One of them, and I used to be in the CPC commission. That's about 3 years ago. So I haven't gone through any rezoning cases recently. So some of this may have changed since. So if it has, let me know. One item that was in zoning was creating incentives for developers to incorporate affordable housing into their projects, and in exchange for height or parking reductions or whatever, they would do that. And it was a very problematic part of the code. It was a really bad fit. We really do need that kind of we need some incentive for developers to consider whether incorporating affordable housing into the project or sort of putting money into an account that then goes and refurbishes something else and so on. But the straightforward question is, are you looking into that part of the code at all?
Yes. We have no specific recommendations on that. We know that's in place now. What we've heard is that, there is benefit to the affordable mixed income housing bonuses that are there, but it may be that, even just getting some of the smaller stuff in is kind of required to go through that process in order to get there. And that maybe we need to look at how it's calibrated between the types of development. We are not recommending that that be eliminated by any means. We just want to make sure it's calibrated correctly.
And I actually would offer a suggestion that right now it's applied to residential developers. We should look into whether it should apply to commercial developers as well.
Okay.
Meaning that when they do the development, they can get some breaks in exchange for contributing towards some other kind of affordable housing. The other one, I don't remember exactly the term, but at some point I ran into situations also related to affordable housing where some of the consideration falls under land that it has been cataloged in some level of market value. I want to say it's called EVM. What is it? MVA, that's right, market value something. And it was when I dealt with that issue in certain cases, I thought it was really preventing us from doing the right thing. And what I mean is this: there was a case specific I recall near the Bishop Arts area, but in the periphery, where that value categorization had been done years ago when that land was worthless, and things changed very quickly there, and it was not updated. And I'm sorry for not being very clear on this because my recollection of this is a little vague, but I remember thinking at the time that system of market valuation was actually bad for area. It was preventing areas with lower value from moving up a step because they're categorized that way, and it immediately allows less quality development and so forth. Anyways, I just want to put that out there for something just to look at and give some thought. And maybe by then, next time we talk about it, I'll remember a little better what the issue was with that.
Okay. Yeah, well, absolutely take a look.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Go
I didn't want to leave mine on for peripheral noise there. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair. Want to empathize with your subdivision comment. It's a lot of subjectivity there. And I think relatedly, again, my question is going to tie into my first round of comments or questions related to coordinating with building code, but also the permitting department here. So I met with the building official last year about the idea of creating a library of interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
So in an ideal world, that doesn't exist, right? Because it's crystal clear, but obviously we're not there. Is that something on the permitting side you recommend? Now this individual is no longer with the city, but how do you look at, when, the zoning code is actually applied to projects that are in for permit and there's vague areas in the code, whether it be subdivision or elsewhere, right? I understand that permitting side might be outside of your scope here, but on the back end, right, what do you recommend that they do to handle these vague areas of the code in a systematic and kind of organized way?
So we have in the diagnostic included a zoning interpretation. As part of zoning interpretations included as one of the kind of zoning approvals and applications. The intent there is for somebody to request the code administrator to render a formal interpretation on the provision of the code. And that's intended to be, it could be this body, it could be, somebody doing a development themselves that, they want to make sure that, for example, this use falls into this use category, sometimes they need that letter for the bank. And so we recommended including that formal process, but somebody's got to bring it up. It's not the code administrator, the code interpreter can't just sit there and be like, I've decided that this is this and this is this and this and this. It's, there's informal things that happen every single day, but there should be a formal process in place, whether it's, bodies like this asking for a formal interpretation, or just somebody looking to do a development. And then those should be kept in a file. What we've often seen, if one piece of paper keeps getting pulled out over and over again, say this is what we've decided is the formal interpretation, that's a sign that a text amendment is needed for clarity. That's kind of the other benefit of it. We try to write everything thinking we're as clear as day and we're really as clear as mud, and that interpretation book can give you a sense of, oh, we need to correct it here because it's not coming across to the public the way it should. So that's our recommendation in the document right now.
Okay, yeah, one instance stands out in my personal experience where we had it was actually the MIHDB design standards. It was very confusing, and that was what led to the meeting. Relatedly, I guess, to staff, is there anything in the works on like a interpretations database? Is there someone in the room that can speak to that? I'm sorry. Like a zoning code interpretations for the permitting staff, right? Do we have a library of like what's recommended for interpretations? Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Megan Weimer, Assistant Director. Yes, we do currently keep a catalog of our interpretations on zoning code. We have that internally, but something that we're working on now is posting that on our website so that they're readily available to the public as well. It doesn't do much good if people aren't aware of it when designing. So yes, we do have that.
Okay. Is there a timeline for making that public?
I don't have a timeline, but I would like for it to be very soon if possible. And we'll also make sure Camiros is aware of those as well. That would be helpful in case we need to just write them into the code. Yep.
There you go.
Thanks for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for a great presentation this morning. I wanted to take care of a couple of questions I had. On your remarks about our subdivision regulations, specifically the 8.503, I didn't think it was mean. I thought it was truthful. I think that piece of in our ordinance can get weaponized sometimes to get into sort of quasi zoning things, and I've seen it for years on CPC. The one potentially beneficial impact of that is the established single-family neighborhood that the values are going up, and someone decides they're going to buy 2 lots and tear down both residences, combine them into one, build a giant house. And so, I think there are reasons why maybe that's not always a great thing for neighborhood stability and the character of the neighborhood, et cetera. So that aspect as well as others, can you comment on if we just didn't have 8.503, what do we have, and what do you do with special circumstances that maybe you don't want just any old platting or any old subdivision to happen?
I mean, the issue of kind of creating the giant house in the small house neighborhood, and that's an issue a lot of places went through with the tear down phenomenon for years. there's other ways to control that in terms of scale. We've had some tools in terms of when there, you could do maximum lot sizes, though I don't know that that's necessarily advisable. I mean, you could unintentionally create a lot of nonconformities doing that. I mean, I think the idea is, everybody else functions without that statement. And that's just how sometimes neighborhoods change. Sometimes the lots get bigger. Sometimes it's just one jerk who builds a giant ugly house. No, and hypothetical, I'm not thinking of anybody in the middle of a small thing, and that just sits there until it, somebody else buys it, tears it down, makes it 3 lots again. I mean, I understand their concerns. It may be through other kinds of controls that come into place. I know there's a number of kind of residential neighborhood kind of overlays that, currently exist in the code to manage that in areas where you really, really want to preserve that character. But a lot of times, I mean, I don't want to sound flippant, but you just kind of got to let things happen. If they meet the code standards, that's how things change. Jesus, this is the conversation we had on the plane. Sorry, I just literally hear Chris's voice in my head. So.
Well, I agree with that. I think so much of our code is designed to prevent change and to control things very, very tightly. So I appreciate that commentary. Have you given any consideration to our notice requirements, which are above and beyond state law and do create some friction and complexity at CPC?
Yes, that has been brought to our attention. We didn't go that far for the purposes of the report. We didn't go that far into the weeds of kind of addressing notice. Generally, our recommendation has always been to comply with what the state says. So if you're going far above and beyond that, that's a lot of expense. The state's now requiring more things to have notice now too. So really, there's a lot of burden that goes on with that. I think the actual mailed notice for whatever you're doing with that should just comply with what the state requires. I think the idea of getting the message out about things happening, there's other ways to do that. It's generally called things like a courtesy notice. You can create a website where people can, flag. I mean, there's ways to do this through kind of online portals that allow for this, or, printing things out and leaving them at a front desk somewhere in the city if you're that interested. But the idea there is really the posted notice, the sign note, the mail notice really should just comply with what the state asks for. And because that also is the legal, going above and beyond, obviously there's burdens, there's costs. Now you've just expanded the legal risk of, I didn't get the notice. I'm 5,000 feet away, but technically I should have gotten a notice and I didn't get a notice. Stop this hearing right now. You're expanding that. I mean, everybody wants a resolution, whether it's positive or negative, and that's the danger of going too far. And so that's absolutely something we're going to look at and make recommendations on. I think that if there really is this desire to really make sure the word gets out, there's other ways to do that through online portals and courtesy notices.
And I would tack on to that. Staff is looking at that also. I know, especially as we have some major projects like potential authorized hearing around PD 595, which will affect a whole lot of people. There are things built into the code that could have a massive impact simply because of the notice requirements, massive financial impact, massive just sort of disruption to good governance overall. And some of these items were built in to make sure that everyone had a chance to say their piece and nothing inequitable was happening, but they do get misused. And so we're starting on a couple of projects. We're still in the nascent phases of them really, but we're taking a hard look at individual noticing items right now. And then again, just looking to Camiros to help us develop really a great system to make sure that there are no gaps in noticing, that we're conforming with law, but that also we're able to move and really move forward.
Okay. I've had a sort of a personal opinion that our code makes it very difficult to do redevelopment and infill development. Our city is largely built out for the most part, and so many of the cases that come into us are second, third generation uses on a piece of land. if we followed generally the recommendations that you've laid out, do you think we've helped ourselves in that respect?
The directions we've set is intended for that explicitly. Your code should reflect in a built out city of Dallas's age, and I'm not insulting her and her age. Your stuff is out there. The districts need to match what you got. You can't, it's a whole thing. You go into some places and it's a built out city. I worked in New Orleans. The whole area of shotgun shacks. They're like, no, these things should all be 5,000 square feet. I'm like, the building's not even like, what are you talking about? They basically tried to impose a suburban standard into an urban area. Shotgun shacks are usually about 2,000 to 2,500 square feet, but they said no. We'll make them bigger. When they come down, we're going to force people to combine. Well, it doesn't happen. And so that's really what the code wants to be, because terms like infill and redevelopment are kind of planning terms. They're not zoning terms. Zoning is, I'm building this on this piece of property. And so we want to make sure that we're making it a lot easier. And that's the goal, because you got to reflect what you got. I mean, you're not going to wholesale change the full developed character of the city.
All right, thank you. Are we getting, I don't see any other questions. And Michael, I think we've done our presentation.
That's correct. I'm just checking if anyone online has any additional. I don't see hands up or text messages on there. So I think
You have one behind you. Sorry.
Sure. I think we can take comments.
Let's take questions.
Good morning. I'm sorry to make this meeting any longer, but this is fun. But I really want to encourage you to pay more attention to the subdivision code. This can be a barrier to the first step of development. It's really important. I'll start with the low-hanging fruit. I would like to suggest that commercial plats be considered for administrative approval and appealable to CPC. There's almost no criteria. At Plan Commission, it's a rubber stamp and pretty much a public announcement of potential development. A few other cities have already done this, and it helps streamline the commercial development process. Shared access development plats are really important. They are being governed by a 2016 policy guide. It's not readily available. It should be reevaluated and codified. There was a comment about when you use shared access versus multifamily, and the difference is when you do shared access, you have to have your plat final before you can get building permits. So that can have an impact on your timeline for vertical construction. I have opinions on 8.503. I appreciate what has been said. Want to add that I think that it is evaluated under incomplete data. When you look at a zoning map, you're looking at mostly at parcel data. These do not necessarily reflect the platted lot, and building sites are not mapped. So when you're making pattern decisions, you have incomplete data. And I don't know if everyone realizes that. I appreciate that it has been abused to keep out development. I heard a couple of unfortunate CPC hearings that one used very large unplatted tracts to say that was the pattern to deny affordable housing development. One denial of a plat said it would change the class of a neighborhood. I nearly jumped through my computer. It's so inappropriate. I think a more appropriate tool could be private deed restrictions where the neighborhood enforces it themselves. If they don't want lots combined, they don't want lots separated, they can enforce that themselves. There's some other nuances in the subdivision code that need to be addressed, but it's been a long morning. Just wanted to mention separately from subdivision, we do have an issue with permit record retention. Single family permits and plans are not kept. So there could be situations where you want to add that second floor to a single family home, but there may not be documentation to say that that was legally permitted. And there's also missing files for those that are should be retained. They're not there due to the cyber attack. So thank you so much. Really appreciate the discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
I think that's what we have for our presentation today. And so unless there are any other questions or discussion items, it's just adopting the minutes and then adjourning to lunch.
Okay. I'd like to just repeat my comment. I thought it was a terrific presentation, a great start on this issue. Thank you all for partnering with us on this. We look forward to moving this forward at whatever pace you and staff can put us on. So we'll look forward to more good things to come. Committee members, we've got a set of meeting minutes before us. I don't have the date on the tip of my tongue, Mr. Wade.
February 18th, 2025.
February 18th. Thank you. Motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes from February 18th.
Thank you, Mr. Carden.
Second.
Mr. McGregor, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion passes. Minutes approved. It's 11:38 a.m. We will adjourn the meeting of ZOAC for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I can't, what? Lunch? Yeah, I'm starving, yes.
Like some people call like the.
No. This is the number. This is the number.
I know.
Article 1.
Hey, it is a number, okay?
I mean, it is a number.
Discrimination.
I
I always have to think that I got to count, I'm not good at math.
You've got a lot of articles.
Yeah.
Maybe you should get it.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I can promise that.
Okay.
I can actually promise that.
One of the people.
What if you think I can do it? I think you can work. It's a good group, guys. Good questions.